Even going back now to the early 2000s, back then there were way more animals in the hunting blocks than there were in the park, because there was very little anti-poaching or any activity in the national park. Around 2011 to 2012, that's when we had the caravans of Sudanese come in. And in 3 seasons they annihilated literally the entire population of elephant here. We went from seeing elephant every day, 3 years later not even to see a track. That's how quick it happened. I came across their tracks on several occasions, and obviously these guys were fully armed on camels, horses, big gangs of them, 25, 30 of them. So whenever we came across fresh tracks we would exit the area, because for sure we would have had a confrontation. The Sudanese actually would cross with their camels and horses through Chad from Sudan all the way across, and then entered Cameroon on its eastern boundary. So our most affected area was Jabal, which borders on the western side of Boubenjida National Park, and on its eastern boundary is Chad. And they actually set up base there, and they just annihilated the elephants. Everything, cows, calves, bulls. There was one spot there where there were over 80 elephants shot in about a 200 meter square spot, and they just hacked out the ivory and moved on. No meat was touched, or it was just ivory, no matter how big or how small. So with the poaching having increased now, before we typically have one PH that was responsible for one concession, and he would sort of run that camp, oversee the anti-poaching, the opening of the area, etc. But the volume of poaching has got to a point now where it's too much, and although we're doing the very best with what we've got, it's not enough. The poaching is outweighing our anti-poaching success by a large margin. And there's nowhere else where these giant eland occur. CAR is probably the only other place where there's some, but that's a conflict zone, and who knows what's going to happen there. What we actually need now is to have a minimum of one guy in charge of anti-poaching per 2 areas, and his sole job would be just to supervise all the patrolling, the movement of the military and the scouts from area to area. They would need a vehicle for this. Obviously right now we're trying to operate on motorcycles. We've got one vehicle between the 4 areas, so we would need 2 guys between the 4 areas that hopefully would have a background in anti-poaching or wildlife, that would understand how to manage that. Maybe if we could all get together and somehow increase the security all the way around, rather than just having little pockets of operators that are protected, areas that are protected, the more we can protect the better. All these hunting areas are a buffer zone around the park. Even going back now to the early 2000s, back then there were way more animals in the hunting blocks than there were in the park, because there was very little anti-poaching or any activity in the national park. So it was full of cattle and poachers. We had way more game here. Now there's more protection in the park and the numbers are coming up there, but there's more poaching in the surrounding areas. So if we could have a system whereby the park had a good anti-poaching system there, they could protect their terrain and then spill over into the hunting blocks around it, it would create a much bigger wildlife zone. I think another alternative could possibly be to fence in a number of the hunting blocks that adjoin the park. So you'd basically a fence from the southern side around onto the park, only leaving, in fact you wouldn't even have to leave the boundary open between the park and Chad, but it would have to be electrified fence, and that would need to be patrolled daily, which is costly. I mean, I know those electric game fences are running around $5,000 a kilometer, so it's not cheap at all. That way at least you could safeguard well over a million acres. Yeah, that would stop all the cattle coming through and people you don't need coming through. But currently what we have in place is not going to do that. So hopefully if we can get some guys to come in and help us here, because we need help here. This is one of the last places in Africa where these eland exist, and it would be a shame for them to disappear, because it's happening around us. We're seeing hunting areas being abandoned, poached out, taken over by cattle herders. Yeah, it's quite scary as to what's happening.